other thing that you're going to get in the owner's manual is there's a series of things right along here that are little jumpers. And again, we're kind of looking at that late 80s, early 90s type of stuff where, you know, it's dip switches and jumpers. If guys were building their own PC, ATs, and XTs and stuff back in the old days, you remember how these worked when you're putting motherboards together. And they, but it is labeled in there, okay, whether or not it's going to be in, you know, load control mode or charge control mode and some of that stuff. Generally speaking, if you're going to use this in an off-grid 12-volt application, just leave everything the way it came. Don't screw with moving those jumpers around. Those are a little bit more of an advanced user thing. I'm not trying to run anybody down on their intelligence or anything, but generally speaking, you just want to leave those alone. These are little knobs actually for setting the some settings on the way it's going to deal with batteries. We're going to leave that alone too. I'm not going to screw with it. And there is also a little jumper. If you're using NiCad batteries only, you would you clip a little wire in there. And again, if anybody's dealt with some of the real pirate ham radio stuff, remember how some of that goes. You know, you open up your Radio Shack, you clip a couple of wires, and all of a sudden you have a lot more channels. With this, it comes one way for your lead acid batteries, and then if you are using NiCads, you clip that little wire and it behaves a little bit differently. We're not going to mess with that either because it's a 12-volt application. So there is stuff in the owner's manual for dealing with the jumper positions. I'm not going to mess with that. And then as far as adjusting the C-series voltage settings, my inclination at this stage in the game is I'm not going to mess with it. Okay, we're not going to screw with it. We're just going to leave it stock, except that I think I'm going to turn the low side down just a little bit. Yeah, I think I want to change that over a little bit. 13 to 15 increments of 0.2. We're gonna mess with that a little bit. I might build it the way it comes and then change a little bit of those voltage ranges later on, because I think on the high side I can deal with a little bit of 14.2 right there, and on the low side I want to deal with a little 13.0 instead of 13.5. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of changing here. Okay, here's something I don't like. As I read a little further into the owner's manual, it says to find the sticker that was packed and stuck to the lower part of the unit, pull these little knobs off, put the sticker in, and then that's how I find my settings. And then when I pull these little knobs off, there's a like a little hex thing on there, right? And so I got to make sure that I had it relatively centered on that spot on the little ratchet. And so I figure out that I'm halfway here, halfway there. I don't like that. I don't like that. Yeah, I really don't like that. Yeah, I don't like that at all. So again, I'm picking this unit because it's a robust unit, not because it's likable. And so I'm setting this low voltage reconnect a little on the high side. There's some recommendations here. You go to 14 and 11.5. The disconnect a little lower. So why that's not done in the software automatically, I don't know, but I guess once it's all set, it stays there, right? So that's part of what makes this thing more heavy duty. Now, next, I've got a bit of work to do, even though you're going to see the next video in just a few seconds, because I've got to reroute some wires here. And but we're going to get this so that I can set these knockouts up and get some wires ready. Okay, so a couple of more things. You know, it works, but I don't like it. On the way this goes, I had originally gotten 2 of these cable keepers, and now I'm realizing because of the size of this thing, I really only needed to be using 1 of them. And it's just a matter of keeping track of which way the batteries come in. So, I mean, which way the cables come in. So, realistically, you only got to use one of these knockouts, and that because it's a 3/4 inch cable keeper. This one's not really necessary right now, but I don't have a plug that size. I'm going to leave it in place. And one thing you got to look out for, you know, normally a lot of electricians like to work fast and efficiently because they're getting paid piecework. On this, you don't want to get too aggressive with jamming a screwdriver in here to knock these things out or deal with it, because don't forget, you got a lot of exposed circuitry. Common screwdriver, flathead, don't use a power tool in any of this. It's just a regular hand twisty flathead screwdriver when putting these things in. So when we put them in, we very gently tighten it down. Don't grunt it, don't use an impact, don't use a power tool. So the way this is going, and man, keep the owner's manual nearby, because it's not as clearly labeled, and sometimes you end up covering up the labels once you have some stuff in there. So this one is what goes to the ground, and because unlike most of the other charge controllers I deal with, they don't do anything to control other loads. So where I have a grounding block right here, I'm going to have to combine a lot of this over to this bolt, that because on this I've done vehicle wiring where the body of the vehicle is our ground, our battery ground, and then over where the battery's hooked up, that goes to the vehicle body. Okay, and that's very common in automotive applications. You may not see it as much in PV applications, but that's the way it's done in cars. And this is basically vehicle wiring. So when you see a lot of these things, that's a ground strap going back and forth, just to make sure that we're going to the body, we're going to a negative. The other side of this was one of the tail lights here, and we're going to this bolt, so that when I've been testing voltage without one of these, that's going to be my test point for the probe. But what I've got to do is combine a lot of these two negatives are going to have to get combined and hooked up to this one, because this one's basically on the end is where it goes when it's not for the array. I have an extra mounting point here because when I eventually use the charge controller with, I'm sorry, not a charge controller, a grid tie inverter, I'm going to be hooking its negative cable into here. I'm going to diverge a little bit from their setup because I'm going to manually switch whether I'm using the grid tie inverter or charging batteries. I'm not going to set, the way I've read everything on the diversion setup, it's almost like you got to use two of these to do that. So I'm not going to mess with that right now. So this one of these is going to hook up to the panel, the other one to the batteries. Again, I'm not a big fan of the arrangement. So apparently it also over here starts talking about common grounds. So the grounds are common, and if the grounds are common, then why do we even have separate plugs? You know, why are these not connected? But it could be on the underside of that, these two are connected. I'm really not sure. But according to the instructions, the battery negative is going to go here. Oh, see, there it goes backwards. Fuck these people. Among other things I just don't like about this, but it's the way it goes. In the diagrams, they explain that the negatives go common on these setups. See, it says common negatives, so these lines are here. It's not the little hoopty thing to show that it's a separate line. Here, they are doing a little hoopty symbol to show that it's a separate line, but I think when this was printed in color once upon a time, they were doing different colors to represent those lines not actually connecting. And because it's different shades of gray. So the PV, the panel negative, which is going to be this, which is this, it goes to the far side. So basically, yeah, left, these two are battery, these two are your panel, and then the battery ground is also, because of where I have this ground block, I'm going to pull this off here, like I just did accidentally, and go to the grounding block. So we're going to get that put together here while there's very little light.